If they're here illegally, they're breaking the law.
Yeah.
These organizations that are trying to help illegal immigrants either get into the United States or once they're here. Well, I think that's largely how Donald Trump got elected so overwhelmingly, because the American people wanted that. That, you know, we value our freedom, our independence. Yeah, I think the immigration issue is the strong talking point for this administration.
America's immigration shockwave. ICE is now carrying out deportations at a pace not seen in years. It was a big pledge by President Trump to get control of US borders, and they're now deporting 1,000 people a day. Meanwhile, Britain languishes with numbers nowhere near that. 8,000 last year, and that was a good year. Joining me tonight is Christina Bobb, former Trump attorney, friend of the show. Welcome back. Christina, you're plugged into the sort of homeland security world, the legal world. What's happened that means that the administration's been able to put the sort of foot to the gas really on this in the last few weeks, and actually almost getting to the stage of the numbers they were promising to deport and arrest?
Yeah, well, I think what's really significant about this administration is they're actually just doing it. They have the will to do it, and they're going forward with that. I think we've seen from prior administrations, it hasn't been a priority. It hasn't been something that they've wanted to push the envelope on. So I don't think truly there really are a lot of legal issues with what they're doing. I think it's perfectly legal. I mean, he's the president of the United States. He's certainly responsible for immigration. He's within the law. Where we're seeing them challenge it is it's really in an area, I think it's just because he is being aggressive in a way that we haven't seen prior administrations conduct themselves. And so and he's having win after win at the Supreme Court.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, so I think he's just more aggressive than most.
Is this a matter of sort of, delicately put it, but sort of low-hanging fruit? These are people that are obviously in the country illegally or have committed crimes. Yeah. Is there a sort of natural ceiling to this sort of clampdown, where actually it's going to get harder and harder to find people who shouldn't be in America, or is it actually this could go on for months?
Well, I hope there's a ceiling to it, meaning I hope they actually get rid of the criminals that have the criminal records, that have harmed people. And we're, unfortunately, almost every day or every week, it feels like we're seeing stories of, oh, here's an immigrant that came in that's been deported 4 times, they've crossed the border 4 times illegally, and they killed an innocent, college student or whoever. We've seen that story play out over and over. So I hope that we get to a point where we actually get rid of all of the low-hanging fruit and we actually get to the harder cases. There's just a lot of them.
What do you say to critics who say that actually the majority of people being detained, some suggesting they're being detained, being pulled over on a whim, they're not criminals? Yes, they may be undocumented migrants, but they're not committing. They're earning a living, they're earning a keep here, and actually, if they're not actually breaking the law, then what's the problem?
Well, the conservative talking point is if they're here illegally, they're breaking the law.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the point. I would push back on that, saying if the American people want that, if that's the policy that we actually want, meaning anybody who comes here can stay, then that needs to be voted on by the people, meaning the people who are elected to make the laws, our senators, our congressmen, they actually need to change the law. We can't just choose to ignore the law. We need to actually have laws on the books that say that. And I think I will go so far as to say I don't think that law has been changed, because the congressmen and senators know that's not actually what the American people want. So no one wants to put that forward.
So you're saying basically it's a matter of political will rather than actually, all of the government, the administration, government itself had these tools at their at their hands. It's just a matter of using them.
Right. And I would say if the left really believes that illegal immigration should be legalized and we should just allow anybody who's capable of evading our border to come here, then make that the law. The reason they're not making it the law is because it's not actually what the American people want.
Has the government actually got the capacity to do this? There's some fascinating adverts, and I've seen the adverts a lot on social media to say, "Come and join ICE. Come, we need people to, and the sign-on bonuses are very generous. Very not a massive amount of training going on. I would suggest people of that. But then those adverts have now changed, and it's now they're sort of calling out for lawyers of all ages across all of America, basically suggesting that they need extra bodies and extra legal experts to basically staff these immigration courts.
Yeah, I think they have ramped up the process so much that they likely do need additional people in order to, you can only process as many people as you have the capacity.
Well,
to
exactly.
process.
It's 1,100 arrests and
Right.
deportation in a single day. That's a remarkable turnaround, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
What happens though? So we've seen obviously some horrific incidents of sort of ICE agents being physically attacked, threatened with violence, shot at in one high-profile case. Leaving that slightly aside, because obviously that's political. That's terrorism, basically. There does seem to be a growing sort of organisation, sort of the left, the sort of open borders advocates, activist class, seem to be organising a little better, and actually, you're starting to see signs pop up in places like Minnesota saying, ICE cannot enter this premises with without a warrant. In the UK, there's a whole cottage industry of this. These sort of charities, the elements of the legal sector, all working together, literally greeting people off the boats and giving them talking points to. Is that as effective in the United States? Are we seeing a sort of organisation in response to this clampdown? Are the proponents of immigration, the proponents of legal immigration, organising it?
Well, I certainly think there's an aspect to that. We have seen, like you're talking about, these organizations that are trying to help illegal immigrants either get into the United States or once they're here kind of infiltrate.
Stay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are seeing that. Whether it's a cottage industry, I think a lot of it's run by nonprofits.
Yeah.
Which is a whole separate issue of
It's remarkable how many.
nonprofits.
It's remarkable how many protesters in this city in DC seem to not have jobs, but actually seem to be paid.
They're paid by nonprofits, and so
It's
that's
astonishing. They're just literally paid to turn up and stuff.
yes, and we do see that a lot. So yeah.
I mean, they're a little bit more subtle in the United Kingdom, a little bit more. But
I would say you guys are probably a little bit more posh about a lot of things, actually.
well, there does seem to be, and that's my kind of question I want to ask you is, it goes back to that point of, is it just political will? Because you can, as people say, President Trump gets shit done. He's a get shit done president. You can just do things.
Yeah.
You can, and we've discussed, I think, before about the idea that actually it's as much about vibes as it is about, actual cuffs. Like, and in fact, if you make it very clear, don't even bother trying to come to the United States because you will get kicked out. In the UK, it feels like there's not quite enough because, governments of all stripes talk hard, talk tough. They know where the public is in it. But they're sort of hamstrung by, various international obligations. How does the United States manage to get around of it? Because we're all a member of the UN. We've signed up to similar conventions. But it seems the US have just turned around and said, sod it.
Well, I think that's largely how Donald Trump got elected so overwhelmingly, because the American people wanted that. That, we value our freedom, our independence, and President Trump really kind of exuded that personality and that vibe, if to use your word. And I think it's just political will. It's what the American people wanted. It's what they voted for, and that's why he was voted in so overwhelmingly. And it's probably at this point in his election or in his administration, it's probably the most successful point that they have.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, it's. If you look at those first few months, obviously the last few months have been a little bit rockier.
Yeah.
There's a lot of grumblings
it's
about
Donald Trump.
Yeah, there's grumblings about the economy. There's been some sort of some tighter numbers in every time that sort of Republicans have come into contact with voters since November last year. Hasn't been great. When Trump's not on the ticket, it's not great. But that initial surge, it's still sort of, that southern border is the one thing that the GOP can point to and say, look, we got this right.
Yeah, I think the immigration issue is the strong talking point for this administration.
Where does it go next, though? Because obviously, fine, 1,000 deportations a day, great. But Donald, I think the pre-election promise was millions, but millions and millions. We're not quite there yet. We're in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. The president really made his sort of quite dramatic escalation in his rhetoric this week, in that he basically says, we don't want Somalians in this country. Their country's a shithole. We don't want them. These are American citizens. These are naturalized, and a lot of them are born in America. Is there a risk there that actually in overcooking the rhetoric now and saying actually we're going to kick out all the Somalians is actually, well, you actually can't. So then there's going to be a bit of a gap between what the White House is saying it's doing and what it actually can do.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I may have missed something specific.
It was at the cabinet yesterday, yeah.
Well, I did see that, but I don't think he was, and this is why I say correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think he was referring to American citizens. I understand a lot of them are Somalians, but I think he's talking about this whole system of bringing in Somalis illegally and kind of building the community illegally from an illegal immigration standpoint. I don't think Donald Trump would support promote deporting American citizens, anyone that's here illegally.
There is an attempt, though. There's a growing movement on the right to suggest that American citizens, I know they're protected under one of the amendments. So off the top of my head, I can't be. If you are born here, you are an American citizen. That there's been an attempt to sort of slightly row back on that.
Well, and I think that's before the Supreme Court, right?
Yeah.
We're waiting for that ruling to come out.
It's pretty clear in the amendment that it says if you're born in America, you are an American citizen.
Well, but it says and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and so. There is a legal argument.
Do you think so? You think he's gonna be successful in that?
I think there's a solid chance. I don't know because it's a very short amendment, or at least that part of it is very short. It's like one sentence with a clause added on to the end that basically says if you are born here and you're subject to the jurisdiction thereof. It's that clause that the Supreme Court is interpreting. Does that mean if you're here illegally, you're not subject to the jurisdiction thereof? Or, there were several different arguments that were made to the Supreme Court, and we're waiting for that ruling. So I find it hard to believe, because when the Supreme Court looks at a case like this, they certainly have to go back to the drafters of the amendment, the 14th Amendment, to determine their intent and the purpose of the amendment. I think it's a hard sell to say that the drafters intended anybody who gets here illegally and has a baby is probably was not their intent.
If you're entering legally, fine. If you're here legally and you have it, there's dozens and dozens of Brits whose parents were here legally,
right,
who were then born in New York or born in Washington, who and then get a passport automatically.
Right, and that amendment was actually intended to protect slaves and children of slaves who had been brought here. That they had children. It's like, okay, you can stay, you're an American. Now, it wasn't even about deportation. It was basically saying you have the rights of a citizen. So it's being applied in a different context than what it was originally intended for, which I obviously support the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
And it will be up to the Supreme Court to determine how that should be interpreted in this situation. To me, it is a hard sell that was the purpose of the amendment. But we'll see. That's up to the Supreme Court. And
well, rumbles on. The other big movement, obviously, the horrific shooting in DC last week now, just over a week ago. The immediate response from the White House was President Trump to say, he's adding, I think it's 13 countries to the sort of banned list, including places like Afghanistan, where the shooter was from. How sustainable is that? Is that going to become a permanent fixture? Do you think that these countries are just permanently going to be on a list of people that just cannot come to the United States?
Nothing is, in theory, permanent.
But for this administration, though?
For this administration, probably. I don't know. I think President Trump's priority on this is the safety of American citizens, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
So probably for this administration, but who knows? Maybe suddenly they find out there's a whole bunch of applicants that are, Mother Teresa, and they want them all to come
There's a remarkable amount of poets and,
yes, exactly.
and human rights campaigners that remarkably cannot go back to Afghanistan for fear of it.
Right.
And they're weird, they've all got beards and are sort of fighting age men.
Yes.
But anyway, we'll go down. We're having exactly the same problem in the United Kingdom as well. The operation, Save Our Allies, which saw 75,000 people. Look, obviously within that there are people who served alongside the United States, served alongside the United Kingdom, and said, and should have been given asylum, should have been given help. They clearly were targets by the Taliban. But really, is the American public really expected to believe that all 70,000 of those people were vetted properly?
Right.
Came in, there was one case in Britain where they brought 22 members of their family, and you think, are they really your dependents?
Right.
And it's just think, we've been slightly taken for a ride here, haven't we?
Well, yeah, slightly. You're being kind.
Generous, yeah.
Yes, and especially if you look at the way we withdrew from Afghanistan and just the horrific process. Quite honestly, the embarrassing.
Yeah, those scenes shamed the
done.
West. Yeah, for generations to come.
I find it hard to believe that they completely botched everything about the withdrawal, but yet managed to vet everybody properly.
That's the point, isn't it? Because that's the thing. People just don't believe it. They just assume it. And also, this guy drove 3,000 miles across America with a Smith & Wesson. Clearly, he wasn't vetted properly, because that sort of person should not have been here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Yes, I think that this administration is right to revisit and go over.
Is that
over
again?
that.
You've worked in government, you've worked in the legal system. Is it credible to suggest that you'll be able to go through reevaluate every single person? That's a massive task, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it is a massive task, but I think the United States, one, we do have a lot of resources. We are fortunate that way, and you can do whatever you want to do. You just can't do everything you want to do.
Yeah.
And so it depends on what you want to prioritize.